Shout out to you, Saints fans. Welcome into the Who Dat Confessional podcast, where we've got a lively one for you tonight, with the New Orleans Saints continuing to make their moves to get salary cap compliant, as well as Jaden Daniels. If Gundam's in the chat, for those that don't know, Gundam's one of our regulars. If Gundam's in the chat, oh my goodness, he's having a cow right now. That man's excited. New Orleans Saints interviewing Jaden Daniels at the Combine. Now, I will go ahead and tell you that was going to happen anyway, but the fact that it's officially announced, I know some of y'all are going to be very excited about that. Obviously, he had an incredible season with LSU, so a lot of Saints fans will be pretty happy about that. And then, of course, we got to talk about Dave Ziegler joining the New Orleans Saints front office as a draft consultant. And we'll talk about what that means. And then, of course, several restructurings happening to get the New Orleans Saints cap compliant with Nate Shepard, Derek Carr, and others. We'll kind of discuss those topics and more. Welcome to all those who are here today. Appreciate y'all being here in the live stream. I know when we get to the offseason, temptation is to like, hey, nothing's happening in football. Don't pay attention. But the real people, like the ones who really enjoy, see, I'm not worried about saying this and people getting offended, because the people who would get offended don't listen to it during the offseason anyway. But the people who really care about football, this is where you'll find them. You'll find them in the podcast in February, March, May, even in June, wanting to get every little bit of content, because football is a 365 sport. But you still should go, love on the Pelicans. Go Pels. Beat the Knicks tonight. Please beat Stephen A. Smith's Knicks. Like, embarrass the hell out of them. Because Stephen A. Smith talking mad trash. And at the start of the show, the Pelicans were winning, but it was still in the first quarter when that happened. So shout out to Nikki DeFish, Rainey, Taylor, Babineau, James Griffon, Chemo Slice, the Antonio, TJ, Dr. Belosh, all of our moderators, everybody else, welcome on in. So let's talk brass tacks. Let's start with the main topic. Dave Ziegler joining the Saints front office, former general manager of the Oakland/Las Vegas Raiders, coming in as a draft consultant. Now, you might go, oh no, the New Orleans Saints are simply trying to become the Raiders. This is terrible. But surely if you look into the history of Ziegler, you're going to like this idea. And here's why I say that. He has been a well-known draft guy for a long time. Now, being a draft guy does not necessarily make you a great GM. Like, we've seen that history past. That doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be great with that. But all of that said, I will say that he has a very nice history and a very nice track record when it comes to his draft in terms of what he's done. We're going to talk about that here a little bit tonight. So I personally like the move. Bringing in anybody that has had success as a draft consultant or in any form of scouting, I think is a nice thing. So if you look at where he's been with the, I wanted to say dynasty, but the dynasty's over, the dynasty part of the New England Patriots. He's also 2 years with the Oakland / technically Las Vegas Raiders. And it's going to take me a while to like properly call them where they're at. But in terms of like his full history of where he's been, started off as a Denver Broncos player personnel assistant all the way back in 2010, was a scout for the Broncos for 2 years, and then became the assistant director of pro scouting for the New England Patriots between 2013 and 2015. Became the director of pro personnel for the Patriots for 16 through 19, and then player personnel before becoming the GM for the Raiders these past 2 seasons. So he's a 3-time Super Bowl champion with the Raiders, and he's got some pretty impressive picks, including Dylan Parham, including Zamir White, especially those mid-round guys we talk about finding success from. Like, we need the New Orleans Saints to be successful in day 2, day 3 type picks. Well, he's got a long track record of finding those type of guys. Now, again, this isn't to say that he did an amazing job as the GM for the Raiders. I wouldn't say he did a terrible job, but I don't cover the Raiders, so I can't speak very much on the subject. I could say that the Raiders over the past couple years, my biggest issue would be the direction they decided to go with a quarterback. Certainly wasn't the best choice. I do like what they're going to try to do with McDaniels or going into Pierce here. Very curious, but I wasn't a huge fan of the Gruden thing. But the Gruden thing came before Dave Ziegler's. I mean, Ziegler was only there with McDaniels, which I wasn't a big fan of McDaniels, never have been a real big fan of McDaniels. And then Pierce now coming in as the interim. So I think this is a good move by New Orleans to add him to the staff to continually try to make the draft process better for New Orleans. I am still curious what the Saints are going to do. What I mean, what the Saints are going to do is right now, as it sits, they've only got 2 picks in the top 100. They've actually technically only got 2 picks in the top like 140. Now, they do have multiple expected compensatory picks that will hit probably in the 5th round. We'll see if one of those is maybe a 4th rounder. And the New Orleans Saints has the 2nd rounder for the Denver Broncos. Then they, of course, have their 1st rounder pick 14. I'm very curious to see if they try to move up to get a 3rd round pick, to try to get a 3rd player in that top 100. And I'm also very, very curious, like all of y'all, what will they use that 1st round pick on, that pick number 14? I mean, the homer in me, like the Saints fan in me, wants it to be either a tackle. I would take quarterback. I hate to say edge rusher because they've consistently failed to get that guy, but they do need an edge rusher. And even a safety. I mean, there's no wrong choice in the 1st round as long as you're taking the best player available to your team. Even if that means like you're like Gundam in the chat and you want Jaden Daniels, who of course they are interviewing at the Combine. Now, granted, I'm going to go ahead and bust the bubble. I used to think that Combine interviews and stuff were a really big deal until I learned getting into scouting and working in that, well, they interview everybody, like literally everybody. So it's not necessarily that big of a deal, but it is still important to see how he works with the team, and maybe they consider drafting him because, as I've said before, I have 0 issue with the New Orleans Saints taking a quarterback. In fact, I actually would love to do that because I believe Derek Carr is a bridge quarterback, which is fine. But I would love to find the quarterback of the future. Jaden Daniels maybe could be that, but I don't think he could be that in year 1 for a New Orleans Saints squad led by a West Coast system. And Kubiak, he would need to grow into that. And I think that'd be perfectly okay. Jordan Love did the same thing in terms of growing into his situation with Green Bay. Turned out beautiful. So I would be okay with it if that's who is available. At this point, I think a lot of people struggle to see Daniels getting outside the top 5. But it is possible. I mean, things happen every draft that we say, that's not going to happen, and it does. And I'm not trying to, again, get any Saints fans' hopes up, but it is a possibility. And I will say that if the New Orleans Saints fall in love with Jay Daniels, we're talking about Dave Ziegler here. If Dave Ziegler in particular comes in as their draft consultant and is in love with Jay Daniels, if the entire scouting department says, look, this is the next guy, as in this is the next, you shouldn't have missed on Mahomes, you can't miss on this guy, you find a way to go get him. We'll see what ends up happening. I will say that there are far better fits for Daniels in year 1 than New Orleans, but at the same time, Daniels does not fit every team, right? It's the same thing like with Lamar Jackson. Not every quarterback fits every system, and regardless of whether a quarterback is like the best, it really depends on fit in terms of where they go. Compare C.J. Stroud with Bryce Young, right? So I don't think that Bryce Young was a terrible player. I don't think he was a bad scout coming or he was a bad scouting report coming out of college. But I do not think that he went to a good situation, and that C.J. Stroud's success is just as much as part of the fact that he is a fantastic player, wants to learn the game, wants to be the game, as it is the situation that he landed in with Bobby Slowick, D'Amico Ryans, a stud left tackle, etc. And C.J. Stroud still can improve, but he's already doing really well, and the situation helps him. And situations help every quarterback. I'm really hopeful that Kubiak helps Derek Carr situationally. I mean, we'll see how that actually plays out. I'm not trying to throw Derek Carr out, but I will say that, you don't necessarily sign a guy in his 30s to be your long-term quarterback. That's typically what you pick up with a bridge. So no matter what move the Saints make, I think that quarterback needs to be on the table. Now, Antonio points out Daniel will be a top 10 pick. If you go to any mock draft simulator, any of them, you're probably going to see him get picked in like the top 5 picks. That is how it is. Like, there's nothing wrong with that. That's just how it's probably going to be. But that doesn't mean that is how it's going to be. And the reason I use probably is because as you go through this process, you're going to notice decisions made that we always question. Now, New England, I'm very curious on. Like, if Bill Belichick was there, I could say, like, with certainty, Jaden Daniels is not getting selected. Like, if Bill was still there, I'd be like, yeah, no shot. No shot at all. But he's not. Very much could go pick 3 there. Who knows what New England does to try to rebuild their franchise and rebuild their future. No telling what the Commanders decide to do. And as far as Chicago goes, it seems pretty likely that they're going to go with Caleb Williams. But again, who truly knows? And then after that, it's, would you see Jaden Daniels go to Atlanta? Possibly, but Again, it's a who's knows. So I'm very curious to see how the draft plays out. And if you're the New Orleans Saints, being in the the mid-teens is a blessing and a curse, because you're not typically going to find a day one ready quarterback, but you could still find a good quarterback in there. It just depends on who you like. Some people really like J.J. McCarthy. Some people like Bo Nix. Some people don't like either one of those guys and think they're complete boo-boo garbage. That's fine. Some people really like Michael Penix out of Washington. Me, I think all three of those guys that I mentioned are basically, round 2 type grades, maybe round 3 grades that probably end up in the first, because the value of the position of quarterback seems to necessitate people drafting them very high, right? So if you do fall in love with a quarterback, and Dave Ziegler coming in hopefully takes the blinders off what could have, in my opinion, I believe has been some Dennis Allen blinders, where he's been very adamant, we're going to take my guy in the first round and y'all kind of have everybody else after that. I'm hoping that the moves they're making, I even said this on Twitter, I guess the website formerly known as Twitter. Everything on paper New Orleans is doing is the right thing when it comes to, are they making the right moves to make this the best offseason they can make it? And I think everything they've done so far is doing that. Revamping the entire offensive coaching staff is doing that. Bringing in more help for your draft process, that's doing that. Let's see what they do when it comes to actual personnel movement, but everything so far is lining up as best as I can really imagine it for my scenarios. And I said the same thing about last year's offseason. And last year's offseason resulted in a 9-8 team that still had a bad offensive coordinator and a head coach we don't believe in. Well, we got rid of the bad offensive coordinator. We'll see what the new one is. You still got the head coach nobody believes in. But if you were able to have a perfect offseason and improve by 2 games, maybe you can have another perfect offseason and improve by 2 more games. And then you're still going to run into the fact that I doubt the Saints are a Super Bowl team no matter what they do because of the head coach. But hey, you very, very possibly are back in the playoffs. So it depends on the type of fan that you are. If you're happy to be winning and have a shot, and that's how I always am, I'm one of those people that as long as there is a shot, I'm happy. Or if you're one of those players that believes, or you're one of those fans that stands on the side of only really care if there's a legitimate shot, you might be unhappy no matter what we do until DA is gone. And I will still say openly, to this day, there's nothing that's happened that's made me want to say keep DA. It just isn't. I mean, the back of my head, like the thing that I keep whispering to myself is Clint Kubiak is your new head coordinator / head coach 2025. That's what I keep whispering in my head. Like, hey, this is all going to move DA out the way for Clint Kubiak to ascend to the Sean Payton level greatness. I can dream, can't I? It's February. Let me dream. Let me dream about what I want to dream about. We'll handle it later. But sure, I don't believe in DA as a Super Bowl head coach, but at the same time, I still love a lot of the moves that we're seeing made so far for this team. Antonio says, I wish we could have drafted a quarterback when we had Breeze. So we had Sean. We had him and Sean who could have mentored him. That was the whole plan with Patrick Mahomes. And you will never convince me that they wouldn't have won a Super Bowl with Patrick Mahomes. I don't know if they would have won 3. Sean Payton, as much credit as I do and have always given Sean Payton, one thing about Sean is that man demands way too much control. And a lot of times that demanding control spilled over into something that he's not very good at, the defense. So because of that, I don't know if I believe in Sean as much as I believe in Andy Reid. Now, I've always said that Sean Payton is historically arguably the best offensive coordinator of the 2010s and of this generation. It's hard to deny him numerically. But I definitely never put him in the top head coach conversation where you have Andy Reid, Bill Belichick, Bill Walsh. Andy Reid has cemented himself there. I think that the fact that Andy Reid has gone to the Super Bowl with multiple teams, even though he didn't win it with multiple teams, automatically has him as the top 3 head coach of all time. Just like Bill Belichick is right up there. Although you can argue if you want to, Andy Reid's better. So that's fine. I don't care. Argue, it's fine. It's the offseason. That's what it's for. So as I look here, man, I go, hey, New Orleans can absolutely make a shot. We'll just see how far it can take it. But it would have been better had you had Patrick Mahomes. And they should have got him. And that's why I said, like, if you believe that Daniels is the guy. I'm just saying, if Dave Ziegler comes in, if Ireland's there, if everybody believes that you can turn Jaden Daniels into an elite guy, especially if Clint Kubiak believes he could do it, you make the move. You spend the resources. And then he sits a year behind Derek Carr, adjusting to the system, working on his mechanics, becoming a better guy, and you unleash him in 2025, which is kind of what the plan was. Like that's what the contract of Derek Carr kind of says. Like the Derek Carr contract was like, we're going to buy 3 years to find out what we're going to do and still try to win while we're doing it. And not everybody agrees with that. You know, a lot of people agree, or a lot of people err on the side of just blow it up, start from scratch, and try again. New Orleans says we're not going to do that. We're going to try to slow build it and win while we're here. And that's just the method that they're going with. And I'm not asking people to agree with it. I'm just saying that's what they're doing. Whether it's right or wrong, that's what they're doing. So if you believe Jaden Daniels is the guy, you go after him. Also, I'm going to say this as somebody who doesn't believe this. If you believe that Penix is the guy, go after him. Go after him. Or if you believe that the model, Jake Haener, is the guy, well, then you don't go after anybody. You go after a left tackle. You find a stud left tackle to sit there for a decade to protect Jake Haener. You need a stud right tackle at some point too, but you find you a stud left tackle to protect Jake Haener. Either way, you've got to make sure you nail the draft. We can all agree with that in the chat. Everybody can agree you got to nail it. Randy says, you like Caleb Williams. He's a good dude. Everyone I know has met him, is a fan of him, and likes him. But here's the thing about that. Does that make you a franchise quarterback? Because you're likable. Because Aaron Rodgers is extremely unlikable and is definitely a franchise quarterback. Now, I don't know about Aaron Rodgers in today's world. I'm very curious how A-Rod returns. But Aaron Rodgers had a good 15-year stretch where he was arguably the best quarterback in the NFL. I think that there are years that Drew Brees was better than him. I think there are years that he won the MVP that I don't necessarily agree with him winning the MVP. But regardless, for example, 2021, that man should not have won the MVP. My opinion. Personal. 2011, that should have been Drew Brees'. Should have been Drew Brees'. But whatever. Point I'm making. I mean, I do realize that in 2011, Aaron Rodgers set like the record for quarterback rating, but it's not the point. I do feel like Drew got robbed. A-Rod's a very unlikable person. Everybody talks trash about Aaron Rodgers except Pat McAfee. That man loves him. Everybody else talks trash about him. Like, his family has disowned him. Players have come out afterwards and said things. So is likability a thing? I don't know. If you're a jerk, but you're great, cool. Be great. It's like, it's one of those things. I just want to win. I don't care who it is. I don't care. Whoever is going to win. And if you believe Caleb Williams is that guy, cool. My thing, if I'm Caleb Williams, I'm begging Chicago, don't draft me. The reason, I don't want to go to Chicago. I don't want to go to Carolina because neither of those teams seem to have figured out how to build a team, let alone use a quarterback. So, yeah, but not like they get a choice, right? A lot of teammates like Rodgers. That's true. There's always a lot of teammates that like Rodgers. There's also a lot of teammates that like Junior Gillette, and he was chasing people around belts. So, I mean, sure, you could be liked. It depends on why you liked. Like, I personally, in terms of like these small circles I've had, in terms of talking to reporters and stuff like that, don't know many people who like Aaron Rodgers. But that doesn't mean anything because I haven't met the guy and he ain't here to defend himself. Nor will he ever come to a random Saints podcast. So there's that. Who knows? I will say where there's smoke, there's fire. And Junior Gillette had friends and Aaron Rodgers has got friends. Doesn't make him likable. So here we are today to debate who the New Orleans Saints should draft at pick number 14. And I'm just going to just piss everybody off and say, hey, New Orleans, go draft Talisi Fuaga out of Oregon State. Yeah, you see that offensive tackle. Boring pick. And everybody's going to be like, damn it, but we needed this. I'm like, sure, you did. But here you go. This is your pick. And live with it. And then afterwards, I'm going to piss everybody off. I'm going to grab like Keon Coleman, wide receiver out of Florida State. And you'll be like, why would you do that? We've got Chris Olave and A.T. Perry. I'm like, haha, gotcha. So we got to have fun this offseason. If y'all ain't ready to have fun, I'm just saying. And yeah, Abraham, I compared Junior Gillette to Aaron Rodgers. I did. It's okay. No faith in Penning. I would say that I'm excited to see what the new offensive line coach can do with Trevor Penning. But Trevor Penning has given you no reason to be confident or have faith in him. That is not to say that you just throw away Trevor Penning and be like, oh, he's trash, don't worry about it. That said, absolutely you look for a tackle. Now, here's the worst thing that happens. You end up with 2 really good tackles. Damn, that's a terrible problem to have. Like, if that's really the worst problem we run into, fine. But when it comes to Trevor Penning, there's no faith to be had there right now. And Mickey Loomis talked about it just about a month ago of how they felt like they rushed him in when they had got him starting this past season. My only rebuttal to that is, are you really rushing a guy 2 years into his career? Sure, his first year he dealt with injury, but that's not really the point. Man, 2 years in the NFL, if you feel like you're rushing him in at 2 years, how confident are you that he's really going to be ready at any given time? So I think that, yes, you want to try to make Trevor Penning work. Absolutely. Trevor Penning cannot be the reason that you don't draft a left tackle. Like, if you're making your big board and Dave Ziegler has come in here to help you out and you ignore him, when he says, hey, this left tackle can really fit your system, is going to work really well, and you're like, nah, we got Trevor Penning, that is the mentality of a loser. And that is not to insult Trevor Penning. Truly, it's not. Because I do think that Trevor Penning has just as good a scouting report as basically anybody in the draft. But can he actually apply those things in terms of potential, that is? But you certainly can't bank your franchise on it. You certainly can't bank your quarterback on it. And if you're talking about getting a new quarterback, whoever that is, if you're a fan of any of the quarterbacks in this draft, Trevor Penning cannot be the guy that you're relying on for that. I mean, hell, Andres Pete was hands down the best left tackle we've seen this team have over the past 2 years. Like, it's not even close. It's not. Andres Pete was far superior to Hurst and definitely superior to Trevor Penning. Now, you would expect that from Andres Pete, being the veteran that he is and being a starter and being a former Pro Bowler. Andres Pete's issues always been health, really. So I guess it wasn't too much of a surprise, but he was your best left tackle. But again, Andres Pete is absolutely not somebody that you can bank the future on, and he's a free agent anyway. So do you even bring him back? And if you did bring him back, he's not somebody that you believe plays 17 games, let alone playoffs. So no matter what, offensive line's a need. And it's crazy because I've seen people say offensive line maybe isn't really a need. I think offensive line is a need, even though I am high on Saldivari as a potential guy, even though I do think that Landon Young showed some upside when he had to play last year. And even though it does look like Ryan Ramczyk probably going to come back and be the starter, probably not going to, injury retire or anything. So sure, maybe good things happen, but I think good teams address the trenches. And I harp on this every offseason. Good teams address the trenches. Cool Sports says, who is Dave Ziegler? Dave Ziegler is the former general manager of the Las Vegas Raiders. His background is actually in scouting, though. So I know a lot of people are going like, oh, Raiders, they suck. Why would you bring him? There's this fallacy. I'm not accusing you of this, Cool Sports, but there's this fallacy on like Twitter and social media that if a guy comes from a franchise that is not currently winning championships, then obviously they are terrible by extension and everything they do should be discounted. But he was the general manager for the Raiders for the past 2 seasons, and he came up in the league starting with the Broncos as a scout and then became the director of pro personnel eventually for the New England Patriots in the middle of, I guess you would say that the second half of their dynasty. He's got 3 Super Bowl rings with the Patriots and then became a GM the past 2 years. So he's got a background in scouting that's very similar to Jeff Ireland. And as I said earlier in the show, just because you are good at scouting does not mean that you're going to be a good general manager. Jeff Ireland was general manager for 6 years in the league with the Miami Dolphins. Only had 1 winning season. That was the first one. Lost the wild card, never saw a winning season again. That was under his reign as general manager. But nobody would deny that Jeff Ireland has definitely reconstituted what was a dead scouting department, was a lackluster scouting department, has been a big part of why it came up. So why don't you like Aaron Rodgers? Because he's not woke? First off, that's just a stupid term. Second of all, no, because he's an a-hole. That's why I don't like Aaron Rodgers. I don't care what somebody's vaccination affiliation is or their political affiliation. Y'all do whatever you want to do, man. It's life. Y'all live your life how you want to live it. He's just a jerk. And everybody I've ever talked to says he's a jerk. Everybody I've ever seen it. The fact that this man's family's disowned. Like, I am the black sheep of my family, but my family ain't disowned me. I don't like A-Rod. Has nothing to do with the fact that he smokes cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs and goes on Pat McAfee and acts like a goofball. It's the fact that his entire family talks about how awful he is. That's it for me. But that's just me looking as an outsider. You might as well be asking my opinion on the Kardashians because I don't know these people. I just see them on TV and I hear what people say. Difference is I've heard people that have actually met him talk about him. But yeah, it's whatever. I don't care. He can do it and believe whatever he wants. He's just a jerk. So I don't like jerks. Who's to say his family above board and great? I mean, that's fair, TJ, but simply playing the law of numbers, if your entire, because we're not just talking about like he has a falling out with his brother. Literally the entire family is like, A-Rod, you suck. Like you're an a-hole. I mean, if everybody says again, where there's smoke, there's fire. I bring it back to the Junior Gillette comparison. Because remember, Junior Gillette became a team captain. Sean Payton was shocked. Junior Gillette had basically bought off all the young guys on the team and was giving them favors and hanging out with them and doing things and being goofy. The man got a C on his chest. And anybody that's ever watched Junior Gillette would not say that man is in the same stratosphere as like your good locker room player. So he's a narcissistic diva. He is. Now, I will say a lot of people in the NFL are narcissistic divas. Sean Payton is a narcissistic diva. And maybe I dislike Aaron Rodgers because he's not my narcissistic diva, and that's okay. I just wanted to point out that I don't give a flying flip about his politics. I really don't. Like, y'all can go be politically whatever you want to be. Because the word woke is stupid to me. And the whole concept of, like, separating people by that is dumb to me, too. That was the only point I really wanted to address. He's not my narcissistic diva, so I don't like him. There we go. We have whittled down that little board to exactly what we needed it to be. Not my narcissistic diva, so I don't like him, but you give me my narcissistic diva, he's the best person in the universe, and everybody else who disagrees is just trash talking. But I will acknowledge what I'm saying. Like, I'm not trying to hide it. I don't know Aaron Rodgers. That man has never done anything to me personally in his life. I am just a talking head on YouTube. Talking heads get to have opinions, apparently. So, TJ says, I just don't trust the media when it comes to talking Rodgers. We can agree to disagree. That's fine. Again, I'm also not just taking the media's opinion. I'm taking opinion of like when I worked and wrote with The Athletic, right? But I also don't want to expect you to feel a certain way just because of me either. Like, believe what you want to believe. Do your own research on whatever topic. It says DA is a diva. Now, DA is not a diva. I mean, he might be a little bit diva, but he's not my diva. He's not, first off, he is not narcissistic enough. I'm sorry. I didn't know if I'd ever say that phrase in my life. DA is not narcissistic enough because a narcissistic diva does not go to the podium and say, we apologize for running up the score. That is just not the type of team we are when we're facing our longtime rivals and opponents. We just don't want to have that type of culture. Who doesn't want to have that type of culture? Bro, like, excuse you? Excuse you. Excuse you. So, no, he's not narcissistic diva enough. In fact, that's maybe why I don't like him. He's too reserved. He's too passive. He's too forgiving. You know what Dennis Allen would be? Dennis Allen would probably be just an amazing Southern Baptist preacher who actually cares about his community. That's probably DA. A good, soft Southern Baptist preacher who doesn't go overboard, loves his community, has a nice little church, and takes care of like the old ladies. That's Dennis Allen. Like he's out there scrubbing the stained glass window that the church has had for 150 years, and he's in khakis and a dress shirt the entire time. He's just a good old guy. That's DA. I'm sorry, sir. You'd make a fantastic religious man, but you are not my narcissistic diva. I need something different in my head coach. And I'm goofy that way, and that's okay. Good old DA. His smile, think about it though. DA smiles perfect for a church pamphlet. Don't tell me it's not. Don't tell me it's not perfect. I promise you DA does a sermon, 20 minutes, done. Period. Like when DA's sermon's done, it's done. Like they go into Denny's. It's over. Just saying. That's what I see when I see DA. I don't see the power in a D'Amico Ryans or the leadership in a Dan Campbell, right? I don't see those things. I see a man who doesn't get mad that the collection plate is a little bit more empty than it should be. He's going to tighten up his belt. He's going to do the repairs on the church himself. But I promise you that's what I see when I see DA. I just see a good, and I'm saying this in like a truly wholesome way. I'm not talking about like the Baptist preachers who are hellfire and brimstone just make you hate your life. I'm talking about the good ones that like you call the church and they'll come help, the grandma install the wheel ramp because she has to be in a wheelchair now and the church installs the wheel ramp. Like that's what I see DA leading. That's his congregation. King James only, right? That's just not my kind of head coach. I want a little bit more fire. Maybe we'll see how it goes, right? Maybe we'll see how it goes. But I am curious how these recent changes with Kubiak coming in with his entire offensive coaching staff, and very curious to see how the changes to, they're not really changes, but bringing in outside voices for the scouting, how that's going to impact this offseason, right? And I'm optimistic. I'm not optimistic in terms of Super Bowl, but I am optimistic in winning the division. I don't know if that's right or wrong of me, but that's kind of where I'm at. So Antonio says, passive-aggressive car, you're diva now, and DA loves everyone. See, here's my thing. There's another side to being a narcissistic diva. To be a narcissistic diva and me like you, you've got to be great. You can't just be a narcissistic diva. Because if you're just a narcissistic diva, you know what you are? You're a dude with a podcast on YouTube. That's it. That's it. For me to actually like you, you have to be great. So I forgot to add that little caveat there right at the, it's the fine print of narcissistic diva acceptability. It's the fine print. You got to be great. You got to be great, right? Like, I love that TJ brings up Mike Thomas. I had zero issue with Michael Thomas being a narcissistic diva when he was great. Zero. None. Please stomp on them. Chauncey Gardner-Johnson with the New Orleans Saints picking off Tom Brady and getting in his face and kicking the Atlanta Falcons logo. Please be narcissistic diva. I was okay with it then. You just got to be great. You got to be great, right? Be great. That's all I ask. Be great. Then I'm allowing you to be a diva and narcissistic. Also, if you are a therapist out there, make sure none of your patients hear this because that's horrible advice. Like, nobody should be that way. Anyway, I'm talking. But you're right, Antonio. Like, the style of DA and Sean Payton are wildly different. They're not even close. It's not really my place to say right or wrong. It's my opinion to say right or wrong. But it's not really like I don't have anything that like makes me right about it. But I do prefer fire and zeal in my coach. I really do. And I think that you even see that in Andy Reid. I think Andy Reid's like an old softy. But Andy Reid, if you ever listen to Andy Reid do his like halftime speeches or when he's actually really good, you believe in him. Like if you've ever listened to Andy Reid talk, I'm not talking about when he's goofing, eating cheeseburgers at the press conference. I'm talking when you actually hear this man in a locker room with his players. There is a leadership quality in there. There is a zeal there that even though that man is 400 years old and 350 pounds, congratulations on the weight loss you've had so far, by the way, Coach Reid. You can believe in that. Andy Reid is 70 years old and still has that fire. Actually, Andy Reid just turned 70 yesterday. Happy birthday, Andy Reid. Wow. That man old. That man old. Okay, one day I'll be that old. Oh, I'm sorry, 65. I was looking at the wrong Andy Reid. There's another Andy Reid out there. He actually turned 66 in March. My bad. I looked at another Andy Reid on PFR. But still, point is, he's got that fire in him, and you can see it in him, right? And I've always loved that about a head coach. Even when I was playing in high school and junior high, I loved my coaches that were passionate, and you saw that passion come through and how they spoke and how they led. And that's just not DA's style. That doesn't necessarily mean DA's bad. Like, I'm not trying to just trash talk, and that's just not the style of coach I prefer. He says, being a diva just puts a spotlight on you and makes people quick to jump your tail when you're not producing. That's very true. Very true. I will add one caveat to what we said before, and TJ, you can confirm this. I've been an A-Rod hater even when he was good and a diva. So to be clear, I've always been an A-Rod hater. And I will own that, and I will just openly say it in front of everybody. I've always been an A-Rod hater. I'm just a hater. Player haters club. I'm the one getting the reward for hating Aaron Rodgers the most. I just am. I win. I win, right? Like I'm cutting that man's tires for no reason. I'm not doing that because that's illegal, but you know what I mean. Emotionally. So I've always wanted to see other people succeed besides A-Rod. So TJ says I gravitate towards contrarian. Maybe that's why I like the guy. Me? That's why you like me? Well, I appreciate you liking me. Can't say A-Rod's contrarian because people talk him being the greatest quarterback ever. I'm like, sucking my teeth in. I like a coach with fire also. Kind of gives your team an identity. I don't know what ours is. Our identity is question mark. I really think that is the best way to describe where the New Orleans Saints are right now. The New Orleans Saints are a question mark identity. And to an extent, it's kind of the identity of every New Orleans team right now. No offense to the Pelicans. Like, I'm not trying to be a Pels hater because I've actually been very vocal in my support for the Pels, but I don't think the Pels have got it figured out all yet, right? Like, the Pels will play great teams and win and then lose to teams that are, 10, 15 games under 500, right? Right? The Pels are all over the place. So there's an identity crisis in all New Orleans sports that they've got to figure out, right? I hope that New Orleans does. And by the way, for a score update going into halftime, New Orleans is winning 48-47. Knicks definitely had the better quarter there in the second. Zion has 10 points. Ingram has 11. You got Herb and Trey both with 8. And your leading rebounder is actually Larry Nance Jr. with 5. So Jose says, you never felt empathy for the guy getting humiliated in the ESPYs and all that with the Favre drama. The media gave him no choice but to be a jerk. I just don't want to cuss, Jose. And no, I don't. No, I don't. No, I do not. I do not have, I don't have any empathy for him, no. Just to answer your question directly. Because here's the thing. A-Rod was being a jerk to all of his, like A-Rod had time to be like, okay, the whole Brett Favre stuff, dirty. But like what A-Rod was doing to his coaches in Green Bay, what A-Rod was trying to do to like Jordan Love and hold him back, rumors. Nah, no empathy. No empathy. Look, maybe he's just being the villain we've painted him out to be. He's simply playing the role we've cast him for. Maybe. And I'll be honest, as much trash as I talk about A-Rod, I'd take an edible with him. Definitely not the same strength edible because whatever edibles he takes would probably kill me. But I'll take an edible with him as long as I get to bring my own edibles. And I'll sit down and have an edible with A-Rod while this man pops 18 edibles and 19 foreign mushrooms that nobody's even identified yet scientifically. But yeah, I mean, that's how I feel about it. Why is this episode about Aaron Rodgers? Who did this? Who derailed the Who Dat Confessional podcast? Cool says statistically, I think Aaron Rodgers does have the highest QBR of all time, but not all about stats. I know someone who waited on Favre, and she says he's a jerk too. Oh, to be very clear, I think Brett Favre is also a jerk. I actually think Brett Favre is worse than Aaron Rodgers. I would not go have an edible with Brett Favre. Let's just go ahead and put all of our opinions on the table for February 27, 2024. I would not have an edible with Brett Favre and his Wrangler racist. I would not. Aaron Rodgers, sure. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it's all a big misunderstanding. Brett Favre? No. Nope. Absolutely not. Abso-freaking-lute. No. Nope. Zero. No Brett Favre. Big jerk. Biggest jerk. Jerk award. You are a big jerk. Sorry. Do not pass go. Do not collect edibles with Rev. Not at all. No. Sorry. That's just me. And it has nothing to do with him sending like penis pictures to people. Like, I don't really care who you send your pictures with. The icing on the cake, like the nail in the coffin for me with Brett Favre, was the Mississippi State funds. That was the issue. And if y'all are not aware of the corruption and welfare scandal that he was a part of, go read up on it. There you go. There you go. So, NT says, has that been proven out in court? I think 3 of the individuals have already pled guilty to conspiracy and theft. And it's just going down the list right now at the DOJ. So several people have already actually, because he's one of like 40 something people in the lawsuit. And I think there's only like 3 or 5 who've just been like, yeah, we did it, guilty, let's go. So, and he keeps trying to get his name removed from the suit and it keeps failing. So, but anyway, that's my opinion. So, trying to be fair to current event. No, it's true. You are innocent until proven guilty. That is a fair thing to do, but that doesn't mean that I have to like you until you're proven innocent. So, right? Like, the thing with the Brett Favre thing, though, since we're talking about it, is like there's text messages of Brett Favre's phone talking about it. Like, there's text. Now, I guess we could argue that somebody else did it, but like there's actually like an evidence trail. It's not like just, oh, bring in Brett Favre, that'll help the case. No, like his phone is a primary piece of the investigation. So that's where like I'm just sitting here going like, look, I get it, innocent until proven guilty, but it's pretty damn damning when this man is texting people about the money. Like, okay. This man never learned about a burner, never watched a Sopranos episode or nothing. Not a one time. Not a one time. Like, man couldn't go to Walmart and pick up a $50 burner and do all this with. Nope. Had to do it with his own AT&T phone or Verizon, whoever he has. But anyway, we have rabbit trailed like crazy. We have rabbit trailed like crazy and wild. Chris Dawson's the crazy part is that the money he has himself. He could have used his own money. He could have, but what do we talk about rich people doing? They always want to use somebody else's money. I mean, great example. Every stadium that gets built in America, every stadium, for some reason, taxpayers fund most of the bill. Why? Like, I love the New Orleans Saints. I really do. Why am I paying for the Superdome? Excuse me? So, anyway, and even, honestly, even the Louisiana Superdome isn't the best example because at least that the state gets something for that. But, I mean, look at all these new stadiums that cities are building like LA and the city is paying for like 75% of it. Like, crazy. I'm late. What's up with the JD5 meeting? So the sad news is, MDOT, that was going to happen anyway and it's planned. The good news is, hey, this is them getting an opportunity to evaluate him mentally, have that type of interview process, because the interview process is the most important thing about the Senior Bowl and the scouting combine, at least for guys like Jaden Daniels. So I'm very curious to see if that can go anywhere. I'll be honest, I wouldn't want Daniels to start on my team year 1 for the New Orleans Saints, but if he sat under Kubiak, I would be pretty daggum happy with that. Pretty daggum happy with that. So, yeah, I would. I would be very happy with that. I think that Daniels has the potential to be an elite player in this league. But I do think that the system has to work around him. And Kubiak coming in with what we assume is the same style of West Coast that we see with Shanahan and even, what he ran when he was with the Vikings. Daniels is not going to slide into that immediately year 1 and be a great player. I just don't believe that. That doesn't mean that I think that he's like stupid and he can't do it. I just think that he's going to have to develop into it. So if they believe that Daniels is the guy and he's available in, a reasonable move, yeah, go after Jaden Daniels. I got no issue with that. And the Saints are making their moves right now to go after free agents. They've already got their, so the NFL salary cap has hit a record high. Thank you to the Swifties. So it went up higher than expected. The New Orleans Saints currently sit about $30 million in the red. But I mean, again, they're doing what they normally do. They have done a Cesar Ruiz restructure. They've done Derek Carr. They did Nate Shepard. They'll be salary cap compliant. They'll pick up, 4 or 5 decent free agents, and then they'll go draft, and we'll complain whether this is the right way to do things for the foreseeable future. So, yeah. And then teacher says, just give us a young quarterback for once. Man, you got to believe in Jake Haener, bro. Believe in Jake Haener. And thank you to the Swifties for helping the New Orleans Saints salary cap. Douglas says, Xavier Weaver being someone the Saints can draft in the second or third round. Oh, you're asking, what do I think about that? Well, second round, I'm very picky with second round. So part of my logic of why I'm not the biggest Xavier Weaver fan is he's old. And that doesn't mean he can't be successful, but he's old with a small frame. Now, if you pick that in round 3, 4 plus, I can live with it. I wouldn't like him in round 2 because he's what, 6'2", but he's only like a buck. He's a very thin, wiry wide receiver. But he also is 23 now, like already. Now, you can be an older player and come in the league and be successful. Michael Thomas was actually an older player coming in the league and be successful. But my thing is, I'm not a huge fan of his frame. And you would think that if he was going to fill out his frame, he would have done it by 23, and he's 23. Not saying he's a bad player, but he's not the type of guy that I would want the New Orleans Saints to pick in the second round. That's the type of guy that I hope falls in day 3, and I go, grab him, steal, nab it, right? He's the A.T. Perry, except I prefer A.T. Perry. You know, it's, I wouldn't be against it, but second round, I personally wouldn't, but that's just me. The reason I brought up A.T. Perry, because A.T. Perry is now, I think A.T. Perry just turned 24. Very similar situation, except A.T. Perry's bigger. Like A.T. Perry's 6'5", like 210. But he's a smaller kind of wiry frame guy, and he's already 23. So with that, I'm kind of like, day 3, love it. Day 2, not really a fan. So not really a fan. But that's just for me. And I understand that there's some people like everybody has a prototype of what they like at different positions. I mean, we definitely know what DA's prototype with defensive ends are in terms of height, weight, speed, everything. And people have that with our wide receivers too. And Kubiak could have a different vision than what we're used to seeing from Saints wide receivers. Like we're used to the split end of the Saints being a very traditional split end. When I say traditional, I mean Michael Thomas and Marcus Colston, 6'3", 210, 205, even 215, larger, not the fastest, bigger split ends. But that doesn't guarantee that's what Kubiak wants in his system, right? Because you could decide that you're going to run a similar system, as in you're going to run a modern West Coast, but maybe you decide that your receivers aren't going to be the traditional size. You're going to work around it, focus more on motion and things. And you look at what they're working with over there in San Francisco. I don't know why my brain didn't want to work San Francisco. I mean, Brandon Ayuk and Deebo Samuels are their biggest wide receivers, and neither of them are above 6 foot, if I remember right. But those are their top 2 wide receivers. Neither are above 6 foot. They're smaller guys. Now, they still weigh 200-plus pounds, and if you remember during the Sean Payton era, that was actually a requirement for basically a wide receiver that got drafted. There was one exception through 15 years, and it was Brandon Cooks. But basically, he always took 6 foot, 200 pounds, and generally ran at least like a 4.4, sometimes 4.5 if it was a split end. You look at what they've been recently doing out there with Shanahan and them, those guys don't fit that mold. The only guy that really fits the mold would be what? Juwan Jennings, and that's like their number 3 wide receiver. So you could absolutely see a change in a paradigm shift for the New Orleans Saints offense, but we won't really know that until we see Kubiak take over and start doing that. Because we know that Carmichael wanted to stick with the same system, like the same traits, the same everything. Carmichael was literally just Sean Payton light. No offense, Pete Carmichael. I hope you have the best success as a consultant in Denver. He literally was Sean Payton light. A.T. Perry is a great example of that. A.T. Perry is a very Sean Payton draft pick. Again, none of this is to like besmirch Sean or even to besmirch Carmichael. It's just who they were. And that is exactly the same type of thing continued. And Kubiak could be completely different. So all of that said, Xavier Weaver could be a guy that they like because they're okay with a slightly smaller frame and leaning more towards short area quickness, yards after catch, things like that. And if that's the case, maybe you like him. Me personally, day 3. Day 3 for me. So, Antonio says, Jake Hayner's too small. At least if you're going to be that small, you have to be really accurate like Breeze or some type of athleticism like Young. I don't see it for Jake. I would say Jake Hayner's a pretty accurate quarterback. I don't think that's a huge issue for him. I mean, sure, there are things that he could be better at. But like CJ Stroud is tiny and great. CJ Stroud's not like hyper athletic runner. And he's still great. Like, I mean, for a rookie, he had a great year. But he's not a runner. He's not a mover. He's not hyper athletic like that. But the dude's not even 220 pounds. You remember that the prototype for quarterback for the longest, for like 30 years, was 6'5", 230 pounds. They're basically tight ends who could throw. Jake Hayner's not that much different than CJ Stroud size-wise. I'm not trying to say that he's as good. 6'3", 218. I just looked it up. That is tiny for a quarterback when the prototype, I'm doing air quotes because it's changing year after year, but the prototype for quarterback is 6'5", like 230. Right? That doesn't mean it's always the case, but if you look at like back in the day, the Mannings, the Roethlisbergers, all those, there's a reason that the Russell Wilsons and the Drew Brees were always quote unquote too short. That's just how things are. You look at a lot of guys who were drafted in that era, they fit a mold, generally a little bit larger. Sure, he's taller, but he's tiny. He's just not that big. Now, he's not Bryce Young small, but he's not that old school prototype. That's fine. But yes, Bryce is like the smallest quarterback in the NFL, period. I don't think there's anybody smaller than Bryce Young. Because Bryce Young's like barely 5'10". Bryce Young, he's Bryce Young. I actually feel really bad for Bryce Young that he's in Carolina. I really do. But that's a different topic for a different time. So, Don says, I don't know if Bryce Young's athleticism will help him. I prefer my quarterback be a pocket passer. And even more, he's small because I want my quarterback running at all. Quarterbacks who run don't last long. There is some truth to that. It depends on the number of hits, but I get the point that you're making. Right? And the more, it's not even about how athletic you are in terms of running. It's how often you get hit, right? Because Bryce Young and Kyler Murray are pretty similar in size. Kyler Murray, at least the beginning of Kyler Murray, I would argue was in a better spot in terms of like team. Like Cliff Kingsbury is the head coach, the general manager, the owner. The Carolina is just a horrible place. It's just a bad place, right? Like, don't go to Carolina right now. I would not wish that on anybody at the moment until they figure out what they're going to do. So, and like, that's the one knock a lot of people have about Jaden Daniels, as we were talking about Jaden Daniels. Jaden Daniels is 6'4", but he's wiry, right? He's thin. That could be fine if you keep him protected. But that dude, 205, I'd look it up, but at 6'4", 205, that's light. So you worry about these things. Just things you got to worry about, right? It doesn't make these guys bad. It's just things that you have to consider when you're going through your team building. And how do you work around that, or how do you help that? So we'll see. Tell you what, though, 55 minutes in, too tall to be that tall in 205. You know he's tall, thin. Yeah, that's like, I'm going to say something that I'm not going to say it because somebody's going to take it the wrong way because I'm not trying to insult him. I was trying to give a reference, but somebody's going to think I'm insulting him and calling him something. And today's internet, you got to be very careful. But he is very, very thin for his height. I mean, I'm 5'10", 240, and I'm a thick man. And to think that, like, you take 40 pounds off of me and then make myself 5 inches taller, 6 inches taller, that's a wiry fella. It's a wiry fella. Put him in somewhere warm because he's going to get cold. About to give that man 2 jackets on the sidelines. But anyway, we'll be back Thursday for another edition of your Who Dat Confessional podcast. I don't know what the heck happened. This was the derail of all derail episodes. It started off first 20 minutes on point, and then Then we started talking about wiry fellas and narcissistic divas, and I don't know what happened. But I want to know that y'all had a great time, and I hope you did. Hope you enjoyed. Hope you got some smiles. Hope you got some laughs. I always enjoy when y'all are here. Hit the like button before you roll out. Join the Discord if you haven't already. Hit me up on Twitter. Appreciate all of you. And somehow we talked about edibles with Aaron Rodgers. It was a good episode if you just want to talk football and life. Do that. God bless. Catch you on the next one. Appreciate every single one of you. Deuces. That's me. We out.